No one who despises themselves attracts the love they truly desire, only the love that confirms their lack of worth. This is not another video about how to win someone over. It is about stopping the begging for emotional scraps and finally becoming whole. When you truly love yourself, something silently shifts. You stop chasing and start magnetizing. The right love does not demand effort, manipulation, or strategies. It flows naturally to those who vibrate in tune with their own essence. Yet reaching that point requires courage. The courage to face your wounds, embrace your darkness, and integrate everything you once learned to reject about yourself. This is a journey back home, inward, and it is in that place that the right person finds you. If this truth resonates with you, comment, "I am love and I attract what is true." In Carl Jung's view, our relationships are not the result of chance, but rather mirrors of what we carry unconsciously. The way we relate to others is first and foremost a reflection of how we relate to ourselves. Those who do not love themselves inevitably project their deficiencies onto others, and instead of loving, they try to fill the void. In such cases, we attract partners who merely confirm our unresolved wounds. Jung described this mechanism as projection, seeing in the other what we fail to recognize in ourselves. Idealized loves, toxic relationships, and obsessive romances are all expressions of parts of us that have yet to be integrated. The shadow, for example, holds the aspects we repress or deny, and these end up manifesting in others as intense attraction or repulsion. Likewise, the animus and anima, our internal representations of the masculine and the feminine, shape the unconscious images that guide our emotional choices. When we begin the process of individuation, we start to acknowledge these inner parts and become whole. A whole person no longer seeks in another what is missing. They share the abundance within. From that moment on, a relationship ceases to be an emotional crutch and becomes a conscious mirror in which two complete individuals grow together. It is this integrated love that flows naturally, not because it is easy, but because it is real, not because it is perfect, but because it is whole. Most failed love stories do not begin with the other, but with the silent void we carry inside. This often imperceptible emptiness leads us to seek in relationships an immediate remedy for old wounds. We want to be loved so that we feel worthy, to fill the inner silence, to soothe the fear of abandonment or rejection. Yet Jung's analytical psychology shows us that this search is not love, it is compensation, and everything we use to compensate ultimately becomes a prison. When we do not have a healthy relationship with ourselves, we project our unresolved needs onto the other. Unconsciously, we look for partners who confirm our inner narrative. If I feel invisible, I may be drawn to someone who ignores me. If I consider myself unworthy, I may fall for someone who criticizes or diminishes me. This cycle is fueled by what Jung called unconscious projection, where we impose on another parts of ourselves we neither recognize nor accept. In our state of lack, we do not love the other for who they are, but for what they represent, a mirror of our own shortcomings. This creates dysfunctional relationships marked by control, jealousy, emotional dependency, and fear of abandonment. Instead of loving freely, we become captives of a constant need for validation. And the cruel irony is that even when the other loves us, it is not enough because the inner void remains, waiting for something that can only come from within. Jungian psychology invites us to look deeply at this dynamic. True transformation begins when we acknowledge that our relational suffering is a call from the soul for internal healing. The pain of not being loved as we wish is often the echo of a childhood where we were not seen, embraced, or validated as needed. Unknowingly, we continue into adulthood trying to force another to repair what our parents could not give. Yet no partner holds the power to restore our lost childhood. When we demand this of someone, we condemn love to frustration. The other is not here to complete us, but to walk alongside us. However, we can only truly experience this kind of relationship when we are already whole. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." Awakening to our own emptiness is painful but necessary, not to assign blame, but to reclaim our emotional autonomy. Self-love is not a spiritual cliché. It is a revolutionary act of breaking unconscious cycles of self-sabotage. It is admitting that no one can love us healthily until we love ourselves first. Healing begins when we stop seeking in another what we lack and start giving ourselves what we have always longed to receive: affection, respect, patience, and care. This process is internal, silent, and often solitary, but deeply liberating. By reconnecting with ourselves, we cease attracting relationships based on scarcity and begin to vibrate in a field where love is not a need, but a choice. In this new state of being, true love can finally manifest. It is no longer a savior, but a companion. It is no longer an escape valve, but a conscious mirror. The moment we treat ourselves with the value we have always desired, we create a vibrational field that repels what hurts us and attracts what honors us. Not by force, but by alignment. In the silence of feelings, we try to hide lives the shadow, the sum of everything we deny, repress, or judge within ourselves. Carl Jung identified this concept as one of the pillars of the human psyche. The shadow is not merely the bad or dark side. It can also hold unrecognized talents, repressed impulses, and desires we do not allow ourselves to feel. When this shadow is not integrated, it finds ways to manifest, especially in our love lives. We are drawn to people who make us feel alive, but often we do not realize that this pulsating life is fueled by aspects of ourselves that we project onto them. Intense passion, an inexplicable fascination, that indefinable quality someone possesses. All of this can be a reflection of our own shadow. For example, a controlling person may be attracted to someone who appears free and spontaneous, because that freedom is something they have repressed in themselves. Deep down, they desire what they fear they might be. This dynamic is even more evident in turbulent relationships. Often what most annoys us in another is precisely what we reject in ourselves. If you do not acknowledge your own aggressiveness, you might fall for someone who expresses it on your behalf. If you hide your vulnerability, you might seek out overly sensitive partners, only to later criticize them for it. The shadow creates this unconscious game, where we search outside for what we do not know how to handle within. The issue is not feeling repulsion or attraction. That is natural. The issue is not knowing where these feelings come from. When we are unaware of our shadow, we act like puppets of internal forces we do not understand. We live out repetitive dramas, fall into the same types of relationships, and then blame fate or the other. But Jung reminds us that the destiny we avoid confronting within manifests outside as repetition. Integrating the shadow is an act of courage. It requires looking at ourselves without masks, admitting that we too feel envy, anger, jealousy, pride, fear, that we can be manipulative, cold, or needy, that behind the facade we build to be loved lies a deep territory crying out for acceptance. And it is precisely when we start embracing these aspects that we cease to be their victims. In love, this translates into freedom. Freedom to choose without repeating old patterns. Freedom to love the other as they are, because we no longer need them to carry our psychic burden. And freedom to say no, to distance ourselves from what hurts us, because there is no longer an unconscious impulse to repeat familiar pain. Self-knowledge brings clarity, and clarity frees us from the compulsion to repeat what destroys us. When we know our shadow, we no longer seek relationships that reflect what we deny in ourselves. We begin to attract partners who complement us rather than fragment us. Relationships become about genuine exchange rather than dependency. Love, not symbiosis. This process is not linear. There will be moments when we relapse into old patterns, but each time we catch ourselves acting from the shadow and choose differently, we take a step toward wholeness. True love does not emerge from perfection, but from awareness. And awareness is only possible when light touches darkness. Healthy relationships are not a product of chance, but of emotional lucidity. Loving with maturity means knowing that what we most admire or reject in another might be revealing forgotten parts of ourselves. It means using love as a mirror, not as a crutch. And in that mirror, we find the greatest gift, the opportunity to become whole. The shadow does not disappear, but it can be integrated. When that happens, we stop loving out of fear and start loving with presence. We cease attracting what we lack and begin to share what we already are. In that state, love requires no effort. It simply happens. Natural, authentic, free. Within every human being, regardless of gender, there exist two fundamental psychic principles, the masculine and the feminine. Carl Jung referred to these as animus, the masculine aspect within women, and anima, the feminine aspect within men. These archetypes are not about gender stereotypes, but represent universal energies that reside in all of us and profoundly shape our attitudes, perceptions, and most importantly, our choices in love. When animus and anima are not integrated, we project their unconscious images onto the people we relate to. We idealize a partner as someone who will complete us because deep down we are seeking outside what we fail to recognize within. A man who is not in touch with his anima might be drawn to a woman who embodies the sensitivity, intuition, and receptivity he has learned to repress. He falls not for who she is, but for an internal image projected onto her. The same goes for a woman who projects her animus. She may be attracted to men who appear strong, decisive, and rational, believing that only through them can she access these qualities. This projection is one of the greatest factors of enchantment and paradoxically frustration in relationships. In the beginning, we see the other as an ideal, a soulmate, the perfect complement. But over time, reality sets in. The other is not the image we projected, and when that image dissolves, shock, disappointment, and pain follow. This occurs because instead of integrating these energies within ourselves, we expected the other to fulfill that role. The process of integration begins with recognizing that we are at once reason and intuition, strength and vulnerability, action and receptivity. Cultivating the animus is about developing focus, structure, and inner firmness. Honoring the anima is about allowing ourselves to feel, intuit, and embrace the non-rational. When we repress either of these poles, we become unbalanced and vulnerable to relationships based on projection. Women who do not integrate their animus may enter relationships where they relinquish their power to the other, expecting their partner to make all the decisions, sustain them emotionally, and lead the relationship. Men disconnected from their anima may become rigid, insensitive, or emotionally blocked, which harms not only the bond with the other, but also their relationship with themselves. And vice versa. Integrating these polarities is an essential step in the journey of individuation, Jung's path toward wholeness. It is not about eliminating differences, but about embracing complementarities within ourselves. When that internal union occurs, the other ceases to be a symbolic savior and becomes a genuine companion. The relationship transforms into a space for authentic exchange rather than unconscious idealization. In this context, love becomes more mature. The desperate longing for someone who understands me completely or heals my pain fades away. Instead of seeking a prince or a goddess, we look for a human being with both light and shadow, who is also on their own path of integration. And the most beautiful part is that in such a scenario, connection is based on a soulful affinity, rather than a need to fill a void. Animus and anima do not need to be sought outside. They already reside within us. When we nurture these internal presences, we expand our emotional and symbolic repertoire. We gain access to more inner resources, more clarity, sensitivity, action, and compassion. From this place, relationships flow with greater balance and awareness. The union of these inner forces is not only a psychological process, but also a deeply spiritual one. It reconnects us with the totality of our being. When we are whole inside, the love that comes from outside does not come to save us, but to share the journey. In that state of balance, the right relationship is not the perfect one. It is the one that resonates with our essence. In Jung's analytical psychology, individuation is the process by which an individual becomes who they truly are, a journey of integrating the conscious and the unconscious, where all parts of the self are embraced and recovered. This path is not solely internal. It transforms how we relate to the world, to others, and especially to love. When a person is undergoing individuation, they stop seeking externally what needs to be built internally. And at that moment, the right love appears, not as a goal, but as a reflection of their inner completeness. Desperately searching for love is often an escape from our own emptiness. We project onto another the impossible task of making us feel whole, secure, and complete. But this frantic search is fueled by a fragmented self, and the more fragmented we are, the more we engage in relationships that mirror our inner division. Life seems intent on showing us, through every meeting and parting, the parts of us that still need to be seen, accepted, and integrated. The bad news is that no one will complete us. The good news is that when we stop searching and turn our gaze inward, something begins to change. We stop sending signals of neediness and start emanating presence. The presence of someone who is complete, who knows their own shadows, yet still chooses themselves. This type of presence carries a silent and irresistible magnetism. It is not about beauty, status, or technique. It is about frequency. Those who are whole vibrate in a way that naturally attracts others who are in tune. Individuation requires effort, commitment, and time. It is not a linear path and is often solitary. It demands confronting deep-seated beliefs, inherited patterns, and emotional wounds. It requires the courage to be honest with oneself, to question why certain stories repeat, why we feel drawn to certain people, and why love always seems to end the same way. This kind of questioning is transformative. It shifts the focus from the other to oneself, and that is where the magic happens. When a person commits to individuation, they begin to live with greater authenticity. They learn to recognize their limits, to say no, and to assert themselves genuinely. They no longer mold themselves to please others. They do not romanticize emotional abuse, nor do they idealize someone they have just met. They view the other as a mirror, not as a rescue, and with that new stance, space is created for a real love to flourish. This love does not emerge from effort but from coherence. It does not come from scarcity but from abundance. It is the love that acknowledges rather than pleads. And the key is in not seeking, not in the sense of closing off or becoming indifferent, but in ceasing to act out of the urgency of lack. The right love is not a conquest, it is a reflection. It manifests when you become the truest version of yourself. That is why love often appears when we least expect it, because in that moment we finally stop trying to control, force, or please. We are simply being, and our very being carries a magnetism that no seduction game can imitate. When you connect with your essence, your purpose, your truth, you become irresistible to those on the same wavelength. Individuation does not lead you to love. It transforms you into love itself. And when that happens, the person who comes into your life does not complete you but adds to you. The relationship ceases to be an escape and becomes a space for expansion. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to grow, learn, and share. This is the true effective magnetism, the silent power of someone who does not need to be chosen to know their own worth, of someone who has already chosen themselves, of someone who has already found themselves. And it is in that state that love flows lightly, not because it is easy, but because it is free, not because it is perfect, but because it is real. The love you desire is not a stroke of luck, it is a consequence of how you relate to yourself. When you love yourself enough, you do not accept less than you deserve, you do not romanticize what hurts you, and you do not cling to what abandons you. You begin to move with a new awareness, the result of a deep dive into the most hidden layers of your psyche, integrating your shadow, embracing your animus or anima, and walking the path of individuation is, above all, an act of self-love. It is through this process that you stop searching and start vibrating. And in that state, the right love does not need to be sought. It simply recognizes who you have become. If this journey resonates with you, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave your comment with the phrase, "I choose to live the love that springs from my wholeness." And now, click on the video appearing on your screen to continue diving into this path of self-knowledge, love, and transformation. Your next step begins now.